Hello there, this is Overflow, and today we're going to try a new type of content for me. So, today we're going to be making some fluid and physics simulations in Blender, and I thought it would be cool because I've been working on this project for like the last 3 days, and why not milk content out of it? It's pretty fun to create, and I'll show you how to do it. So, before we actually take a look at it, I'm going to put the output on the screen, so you'll get to see what it looks like once it's finished. So now, hopefully in post-production, I've actually managed to do that. And yeah, so we're going to start in Blender. And while you're doing this, you might want to make sure that you have an adequately powerful computer to render it, because I don't want you to start doing this project and then realize that it's going to take a really long time. The clip that you just saw, it was 207 frames. I cut it off before it could finish because I really didn't want to have it do anymore. On a base model MacBook Pro, it took me about 2 days to get 207 frames at about 18 minutes a frame. So just a word of caution, if you actually want to do this project, it might require a lot of computer power. So let's get into it. So we have the Blender default cube, which I'm actually not going to delete because we could use it as our domain for our liquid project. So first we're going to scale it up. We're just going to move it. So if you're wondering what a domain is, I like to think of it as the magical bucket that keeps all the water in your fluid simulation. So you can choose any shape for your domain, I believe, but I like to keep it as a cube because it looks nice. So you might want to scale that around. And while we're here, I'm going to delete the default things. On macOS, make sure you hit FN delete. It's a lot faster than that. I believe it's a lot faster when you hit FN delete. I'm going to line it up. And now, all we have to do is click on this handy button right here. And you just hit the fluid button. Since this is our domain, this is where our liquid is going to be. I'm going to choose the type as domain. We might want to scale it up a little bit more, just for the funsies. And since we're going to be doing a liquid simulation, we're going to change the domain type to liquid, resolution 32. If you want it to look more realistic, you could always bump it up. And then border collisions, we'll talk about that later. Or maybe I won't, because I'll probably just forget. At least you have things like mesh, which I love to choose because that actually makes this. It generates a mesh out of the water instead of whatever the heck. You also want to choose a folder for your things to go into. So you'll want to create a new folder, call it whatever. And then, so this is where your baked fluid data will go into. And you also want to change the type to all. And then that's basically how I like to do it. So now we're going to change back to wireframe here, so that you can see where everything is. I'm going to add in a UV sphere, and this is where the fluid is going to come out of, so you might want to scale that up. And then we hit the fluid button, and then this time we want to hit flow because that's where our water will flow in, and it's going to be a liquid flow. And geometry basically means that it's going to use the geometry, so we're just going to drop a sphere into it. So let's give this a try. It might take literally forever to bake. So while we're doing this, if you want to see how your current fluid simulation would go out, you hit the bake all button, and then your computer will just bake it, and then you'll be able to see how it looks. So if I haven't screwed it up so far, you should see a circular shape of water splash out. So just like that. So that's not exactly what we want, because in the video you could see that it was continuously streaming. So we just choose inflow and then flow source, And then you can mess with initial velocity. I like to double this because it just makes it go faster. It's less frames for your computer to render. And then you could do X, Y, and Z. Let's go for like 500 on the Z because I just want to see how it's going. Because honestly, the fun of Blender is just messing around. You know, messing around, get something really goofy, and then producing a result at the end. That's basically what art is, messing around and then shoving something out the door as a result. So I'm going to let this bake. Okay, so another word of caution, there we go, is that the more you do with it, the slower it becomes. So you can see that our bake times were a lot slower, and I probably have to slow it up and fasten it up in post. So that was going the wrong direction. So I guess we make it negative. Let's drop it down to like negative 300. And then now all you have to do is add some physics. So in the video that you guys saw, I used text. I personally didn't, after like I did it, I didn't really like the idea of using text because it wasn't just high, the resolution wasn't high enough for me. So this time I'm going to use a torus, and I'm going to show you how to add in an effector. So you have your torus selected, or the Blender donut, as you know, everyone knows it now. You have your torus, you hit the fluid button, and you hit it as the effector. This means that the torus will effect the water that's coming out. You can set it as collision. Might want to up the sampling a little bit, and then I set the surface thickness to 1 because to be honest, I don't know what these options do. I just play around with them, and if it looks nice, it looks nice. So we're gonna free them all and bake them all again. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our fluid simulation. We hit the play and we can see it works relatively well. There's always some weirdness around collision. It might be because of my surface thickness value, but yeah. This looks pretty cool so far. And the benefit of this is that there's only so many frames that I have to render. It might look a little choppy, but that's okay. So this means that I only have to render like 60 frames, because after 80, it just kind of like messes around in the torus. So let's go to 80. We'll just chop it off at 80. This is 100% gonna speed up the time that it takes for you to do literally anything. So we'll bake it again. There we go. And now our renders are a little bit faster because we only have to do some frames. Okay, so if we set it onto just this, you'll notice that it's already turned into a mesh. So that's great. So, yep, there we go. If you selected the mesh option on your domain, that makes it so that it generates a mesh out of the fluid, which is pretty cool. And the final step, I'm gonna go back into wireframe, select it all, move it up a little, and let's see, does it play still? Yep. Okay. So now here comes the hard part in terms of rendering for me. So you'll want to go into your materials right here, because this doesn't look like water, this just looks like white liquid. So you can of course always change the hue of it. So if I go into this, so this is still Eevee, so you can see its hue, but as most of you might know, water is often transparent. So we don't want just a blob of liquid. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to change this into glass BSTF, and glass doesn't really work in Eevee, so you'll have to change it into cycles. And then now you can see, like, you can see through the liquid a little. but it also does make rendering a lot slower. And then I believe about 1.3 is what water looks like. Forgot the specific value, but I like to have it on more teetering the transparent side than the opaque side. We can change the color value. I like to add a slight, like a very slight blue tint to it. That's more of lilac. I think that's a good blue tint. It's a little too saturated. So you don't want to saturate it too much, as that makes it kind of look weird. So I think that's a relatively good. It looks like blue water, like it's blue. So now all we have to do is add a light source and a camera. So we're gonna go back into this view because it's a lot easier messing with light when you don't have to like see it do the rendering thing. So we'll add a sun. Then since it's mostly artistic vision, I'm just showing you how fluid simulations get done. Let's set the strength to 2. I'm just gonna add a sun in here. And yeah. Okay, so it's not looking as dark anymore. And then for the torus, since it still looks kind of boring, I want to add, so in my video I did an emissive, so that was, I think it was this one, emission, I forgot, but if you want to have it like glow, like neon glow, that's what I do. And so now this is a glass torus, and you'll want to wait for it to fully render in the viewport. So at this point, I think it looks pretty good, so we'll right-click Shade Smooth this, because water is often smooth and not blobby. And then for the output, so at this point, the only thing that we're missing is a camera. So we're going to go back into this perspective. And again, it doesn't work properly because this uses Eevee to render, and Eevee doesn't really support the glass BSDF. But I do kind of like this metallic look. I think this is kind of cool. So, we're going to go back into this view. Then we are going to Shift A, and then add a camera. And then you can position the camera to wherever you want. So hit this camera button if you want to see what the camera is currently looking at. And pro tip, you can drag open another panel in Blender, and if you click the camera here, then you can move the camera while you're looking at what the camera is looking at. So I'm gonna move this a little out of the way so that doesn't cover the entire frame. And you can do some funny camera tricks like adjusting the focal length, which gamers, you might know this as FOV. You can adjust the FOV of the camera. I know that's probably oversimplifying this, and some nerd in the comments will destroy me, but who cares? It's FOV to me. Okay, and then we could lift it up, and then we could probably zoom in a little. So at this point, we're just polishing, and if you just like to skip to somewhere else, you can do that. So I'm also going to add a bottom. Whoops. So select the plane. We'll just add a bottom to it so that the transparent glass will have somewhere to like be on. Oops, what did that do? So what I'm doing here is I just press S and I'm just moving the mouse cursor up and down. I'm just gonna add a plane until it looks like this. I think that's good. And then let's drag this over to combine it to put a general view in, and then we'll see how the glass looks. Oops, keep pressing F. S, don't press S, press Shift to move your camera. So we'll let it rip for a moment. So let's do like 35 frames in. You can see the water is refracting in the glass. So now all we have to do is just go into the cycles, and we're going to switch into GPU compute so it's a little faster. And while I talk about it, let me show you how to enable your GPU in Blender. So you'll want to go into Edit, Preferences, and then it opens up this window. And you'll want to hit wherever you have it. Back when I was using a regular desktop, I believe Optics was a better choice. Optics, CUDA, those were pretty good choices. Maybe PhysX, but you choose those. But if you're on something like an M1 MacBook, you choose Metal. And I personally like to use both the GPU and the CPU, so it's slightly faster. But you could just use the GPU. There's also Metal Ray Tracing, which is cool. And then when you have those enabled, you can close this, and then you can see rendering done, but it still looks like there's like particles in there. So what we want to do is we want to go into this render button. We'll want to hit the denoiser, and this just removes a lot of the noise that we have. So max samples, you could choose however many. Now be careful, because the higher it is, the more blurry it looks. So you'll want to play with this in the viewport and see what really looks like that it's not like bad anymore. It doesn't really look like fizzly. And so you want to make sure the render is as fast as you can, because you don't want to spend 3 days just having your computer sitting out there. So I think 2048 may be a good option if you don't have like the latest 4090 as a space heater. So we turn on the denoise here, and we'll just have this render out, because at 1024, this is what's going to look like. And, okay. So once this completes, I'm going to show you how you can render, and then, funny thing, I'm not going to render it, because I don't have the time for that. So instead, okay, so this is what it's gonna look like at 1024, and I think that's okay with it. I'm okay with it, because you could just play with, your values. And then, yeah, so we're going to save the file. I'm gonna save as something like water.blend. That's great. Save Blender file. And then one final thing that I want to show you is that you want to change your output folder to another folder. So you don't want to be in your temporary, so I'd recommend you put it in your documents folder. So since I'm not going to render this, I'm not going to do it. And you might want to change some, output things, and you might want to reduce the compression, but that's for you to play with. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. I'm going to show you how you can use Blender to put together the images that Blender generated. So right here, this was the render that I did. And you can see that it's an assortment of 207 images. And we can go through them like this. It's all just images, and that's not really a video. So what I'm going to do is open up a new Blender file, and you want to hit video editing this time around. And all you have to do is hit the add button, image sequence, go into your whatever folder that you chose to hold all of your images, select all your images. So pretty sure there's a faster way to do this, but this is the tedious way I usually do it. So just hit shift and then select them all. So now that we have all of our images, hit add image strip. And then, there you go, let's give it a play. Okay, so this is at 8 FPS. You might get better FPS if, you could set it. I set mine to 30 FPS because 60 FPS looked a little weird. So this is probably because I'm OBS recording and it's trying to do the render things. So output, set your output to something like your movies folder. and then yeah, you hit the render animation video, and you can see this is a lot faster because it's just putting together PNGs. Okay, now that it's complete, we can go into our files, go into the movies, and then here's the file. We hit play, you can see it's a wonderfully smooth animation. And it looks pretty good. You know, the water almost looks like edible jelly. Like, it looks super good if you play with the watercolor. You can see that it's blurring. So that's something you definitely want to try out with Cycles, but just word of caution, it's going to take a long time. But anyways, thank you for watching, and that's today's fun tutorial. With that, I thank you for watching.